Welcome to Audacity Works, a podcast inspired by and dedicated to the working artist, the creative entrepreneur, and generally, doing the damn thing. This exists on the premise that the world belongs to those who have the audacity to believe that their lives have value. This is for you. Welcome to Audacity Works. I am your host, Rachel Strickland, and this is episode number 140, and it's about... Well, it's kind of hard to summarize, so I'm just going to tell you what the question is. This was a request from my friend Vix. What's up, Vix? How you doing, baby? And Vix asks, as someone who's been creating their own one-woman show, how do you show your work in progress if you've only got one act or a partial act? And Vix is asking this specifically because of residencies that ask for works to be shown as part of their program. Like, here's the residency. Part of our terms is that you give a work in progress showing that's open to the public, etc. And Vix is like, do I just put my 4 or 5 minute aerial piece on and then tell everyone to go home? Like, what about the larger context of the work that it's supposed to be a part of? So let's talk about it. This is part of what I would call this kind of residency product-based, not process-based. But even in process-based residencies, there's usually an opportunity to share something with the public, whether or not it's mandatory or required by the terms of the residency itself. But some terms of some residencies do require you to show something as a community effort at the end of your time there. And I think an important thing to understand when we deal with this kind of question is the shape of the question itself. And because I know Vix, I know that Vix has been in the gig economy for a long time. And in the gig economy, you have something polished as fuck. And that's what you sell. And that's what people expect of you. So when someone like Vix or anyone else who's been in the gig economy for such a long time hears, we're going to have a showing at the end of this time, what do you think that equals for them in their head? It's like, oh, well, that means I have to have something polished and palatable and even marketable by the end of this, a week, 2 weeks? So I wanted to give that kind of context so that if this is something that comes up for you, think about the shape of the question and what's influencing the question for you. Is it your past experiences? Because I too came from gig economy, and going into things that were more process-based, like artistic residencies, I had no basis for comparison for something like that. I've talked about this before on the podcast, that when I went to my residency at Atlantic Center for the Arts, which is like my first big one, I agonized about being prepared for the residency because the only basis for comparison I had was actual shows and actual work, like on stage, where everything was expected to be done and polished. And then, of course, I got there, and most of the artists hadn't prepared a damn thing, because that wasn't the point of a residency, but I wasn't familiar enough with that culture to know. Hell, I think one of them even told me, oh yeah, I haven't created anything in like 4 years. And I was like, what the fuck was I torturing myself about? That was so pointless. So the first point I wanted to make is that a showing at an artistic residency is not anything like what you're used to in gig economy. Very different beast. And it should be, because gig economy has a very different purpose. What's the purpose of gig economy? Making money. What's the purpose of artistic residencies? Making art. At least it should be. And we'll talk about where this could get sticky in a few minutes. So, what's influencing the shape of the question? And what is the purpose of that context? Like, what's the intention of the context that you're coming from? And might that be coloring how you feel about this requirement? Because my answer to Vix, and I already told her this, in a DM, which is, yeah, you just show whatever it is that you came up with, even if it's like you sticking your finger into a jar of peanut butter and smearing it on a canvas for a few minutes. Like, if that's what you came up with during the residency, that's exactly what you do, and you don't do anything to make it cleaner or more polished or more palatable, and definitely not marketable, because that's not the point of a residency. The point of a residency is to create, to generate ideas, and not just ideas, but drafts, mistakes. Like, that's what a residency is for. Which is why I love process-based residencies so much, because there's nothing expected of you at all. Like, you use the time as you see fit and as your muse dictates. And if that end of the time showing comes up, you're like, nope, it's just not the right time, then you don't have to. And I think it can be really tricky for someone who's used to being in an event or in a gig-based market, and then they go into like artistic residency world. If you tell a performing artist who's been in the gig economy for years that there's a showing at the end of a residency and the public is coming to it, the real danger here is that it burrows into their brains, and then it suddenly becomes all about the end sharing and not about the process of creation in the residency that they really have the opportunity to dig into. I learned a version of this during Creatrix not even 2 months ago. And that was that I had planned this photo shoot with Max Cooper coming down to take some portraits of everyone. And I was like, oh, it'll just be this fun thing, as sort of like a little cherry on top. Not realizing like who I was talking to, okay? Because they heard we're going to end in a photo shoot, and then it became, oh shit, I have to prepare for the photo shoot. Now, that's not their fault. That's on me. That's on me because I failed to recognize the context that they were coming from. And of course they felt that way. So if you are a performing artist, or, I don't know what it's like to be like a two-dimensional artist or like a sculptor or anything like that. I guess you just show whatever surely the principle is the same, but if I were a sculptor and I knew there was an end of residency sharing, I don't think I would be concerned, because sculptors aren't known for, their live events so much. So yeah, if you're a performing artist and you have a residency and there's a sharing opportunity at the end of that residency, mind yourself, because it's very easy to let that idea of the show take over your entire residency and hijack your experience. That's like the big advice that I want to impart is, don't let the sharing hijack your residency. This is an opportunity to put something unpolished in front of live people, and if you're able, and if they allow you to, which I would push for this really hard if they didn't, allow you to, is to ask the audience questions that are useful for you afterwards. Well, let's dig kind of deeper into Vix's question here, because she goes on to say, well, what if I intend to create a much longer show, solo or multiple people in the cast, but just haven't gotten that far in the process? So here's the thing in response to that sort of add-on to the question, is that it doesn't matter what the full intention is, because I know very little about, what the grand picture of what Vix wants to create, but it's going to take a lot of research and development. I know that. And I don't think there's a way to prepare an audience to see something that's in progress that doesn't sound like an apology. to stand in front of them and be like, so I'm going to do this thing. This is what I've been working on. It's actually part of a much bigger show that has more people in it. And, but like, this is just what I have right now. Can you hear it? It sounds like an apology, and there's nothing to apologize for. Now, if there is a part of the context that it's very, very important that the audience know that's not going to be made clear from whatever half-formed goblin has lurched out of you during the residency, then sure, you can tell that to the audience. But it's almost never necessary. At any rate, my advice is still the same. You take whatever you have worked on, and hopefully you didn't even think about the sharing that entire time that you were on residency. And it's just you being able to run through it one more time with or without, quote unquote mistakes. Artistic residencies know this. Like, anyone who runs a residency program that expects something polished at the end of it, I would question the integrity of that expectation, because it's not what it's for. Now, remember when I said it could get sticky? This is where I'm going to talk about how it could get sticky, because people are catching on that artistic residencies are desirable. And, there's paid and unpaid residencies, and there's residencies that cost money. And I'm not saying any of them are better than the other. It's just different. But what would give me pause is if the sharing that's open to the public at the end of the residency had ticket sales. Now, not necessarily a red flag, because sometimes it's built in to the way the residency is run as a way of funding the residency and making money for the organization. I think that's totally understandable, but I would still ask. And if that was the answer, I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. Of course, that's an avenue for funding this whole beautiful thing that exists. Huzzah! But it is worth asking, because when tickets are sold to what's essentially a works in progress showing, it changes, or it can easily change the way the artist feels about that showing. And it might not even be something that's immediately recognizable. It could be very subconscious. But particularly if you come from gig economy and then go into residency space, you're like, the ticket sales are doing great. And you're like, oh shit, people have paid money. That's gonna, like, those neural pathways are already there in your brain. So it would take a lot of dedicated, focused self-awareness not to take that and run with it. And then put all those expectations onto what you've been creating, that it needs to be polished and palatable and marketable, because none of those things should be true at this stage. And just like as a tiny story time, I've seen a lot of works in progress sharings, and not just like aerial performance art, but music and poetry, and half of it I didn't even recognize. I did not get anything from a lot of it, and it didn't matter, because they weren't trying to get me to get anything. They were just like, this is what we've been doing. Like, okay, I have no idea what that was, but I support you making it. Like, keep on going. It might never be my cup of tea. I don't have to understand it, and it didn't matter at all. I've also seen some things that I thought were pretty damn brilliant come out of a work in progress sharing. Like, it was still nascent, it was still at the beginning of its journey. No, there was no judgment in the room. So, overarching advice here, don't worry about what the residency wants, okay? Don't, especially in terms of the end of residency sharing, do not worry about what the residency wants. You just show them what you've been working on, and be honest about that, and demand your experience as an artist working at a residency intensively. Demand that that is the focus of your time there and not some arbitrary little showing at the end. I hope that you can have fun with it. Not speaking very generally here. If you have an opportunity to share something publicly, I hope that it's fun for you. That it should be. It won't be polished. I hope it's not, because that would mean you had spent your residency polishing something for the end of the show instead of, experimenting. And like, you can polish an act for a show at home. We do that all year long. But on residency, you get to experience something different and a different way of making work. That's really cool. Like, some people hate it, some people love it. I love it. I love it. If you want to add things onto this, you can always add an artist talk. If you feel like it's just not enough, or if they specifically ask you for an artist talk or a certain amount of time to be filled, you can use that to fill the time. There's usually other artists present as well on residency, and you can invite them to present something as well. But keep the focus on you and your work, and get your experience. Get your experience without worrying about the sharing. That is what I hope you come away from this podcast with. Happy July, by the way. It's going to be July by the time you hear this. Happy July. It's hot as fuck down here. How y'all doing? I hope that you are not melting so much. I really like the heat. I'm basically a large lizard, so I'm very happy. I'll be leaving for the Irish Aerial Dance Festival in a couple of weeks, and I'm looking at my big printed out wall calendar now. I'm like, oh shit, I'm going to need to record like a lot of podcasts before I leave. So if you've been dilly-dallying on asking, if you have a subject you want me to talk about on here, now would be the time to do that in the next couple of days, because I got to record like 4 before I leave for Ireland, because there ain't no time for recording podcasts at the Irish Aerial Dance Festival. If you've been listening to this episode like, what the fuck is an artist residency? I have 2 episodes for you. Episode 31, Artist Residencies, what the hell is that? And episode 37, Artist Residencies for aerialists in particular. The link to both of those is in the show notes for your leisurely perusal. So Vix, thank you so much for the question and giving me something so juicy to talk about today. Don't worry about the larger context. You just show them whatever you made. Like, look, here's my pancake. Here's my pancake. If you have requests for future episodes, you can reach me always on Instagram at Rachel Strickland Creative or on Patreon at Rachel Strickland Creative. This podcast is powered by Patreon, so extra special fuzzy shout out to my patrons for frankly making me possible. I could not do this without you. Thank you. Until next time, friends, happy Pride. That's right, we're going to just keep on going for the rest of the year and onwards. Why should it end at the end of June? Let's have rainbows all year long. Happy summer. Don't go back to sleep.